How about Deion Barnes? Beats the odds, fends off Miami of Florida and USC, and gets an impact defensive lineman in Randy Adirika.
You are Locked On Nittany Lions, your daily podcast on the Penn State Nittany Lions. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
The Nittany Lions get their defensive tackle. It is Florida native Randy Adirika, and this is just another win for Deion Barnes. This is Locked On Nittany Lions. I'm your host, Seyko, and thanks so much for making us your first listen and watch every single day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts, including YouTube. And because it's Penn State recruiting, because they got a commitment, help me welcome them back. The Locked On Podcast Network's recruiting expert, Brian Smith. All of his socials and platforms will be linked in the description. And today's bonus segment, reacting to Randy Adirika's commitment, is brought to you by LinkedIn. These days, every new potential hire can feel like a high-stakes wager for your small business. That is why LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the right people for your team faster and for free. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. Terms and conditions apply. Top 150 player according to Rivals, 4-star defensive tackle, someone that's listed at 6'4", 280 pounds. He plays larger than that. Brian, it was so back and forth because on Monday it was, well, Miami could potentially land his commitment. And then just 48 hours later, going into, or less than that, I should say, 24 hours later, going into this Tuesday, that Randy Adirika is committed to Penn State.
That is recruiting in a nutshell right there.
Say it every time.
Well, that's because something goofy happens every time I speak with you on this show. But that really is the nature of teenagers, first off. NIL, whether or not you want to leave home, all these different people telling you how great you are. It's confusing for these young men, so I understand. But what is Penn State getting? A big defensive tackle that played at Miami Central against elite competition, kid with offers from programs around the country, and really good dude. This is going to be a guy that fits into their locker room at a critical spot. It's a really, really good pickup for the Nittany Lions.
I mean, don't get me wrong. There were other defensive tackle targets that Penn State had, but from what I've gathered, from what you've gathered, is that Penn State had Adirika pretty high up on their big board.
Yeah, I think this is a kid that they really wanted. Maybe that's the reason it ended up there too. Other schools recruited him, but he was a priority with Penn State staff. You can tell. Teams might try to keep you around on the list at other places, but most kids, especially someone as smart as Randy, are going to kind of know the deal. And he's a kid that's pretty bright. I've been around him a few times. He understands how this works. And Penn State's defense is probably a pretty good selling point as well. Last year's defense is an easy thing to look at. Show him the film. That's how we're going to use you. And for those of you that are wondering, this is a guy that's a power rusher that still needs to learn more pass rush moves, but you're not going to run the ball on him. He's around 280. He's athletic, and he is extremely determined. He plays hard. He's going to fit right in in Happy Valley.
And that was kind of my follow-up question. What are his best attributes? I mean, on tape, he's overwhelming offensive linemen that just aren't as talented as him. But when he gets to face more comparable opponents on the offensive line, and he's already playing at a really good competition level. But I'm saying when more Division I like athletes are around him, where does Adirika kind of best fit in? And that's that run stuffing ability.
There's nothing wrong with that, man. Teams that don't have guys like Randy are teams that don't end up making runs in the playoff. That's going to be the norm, and it's always been that way, really. If you don't have D tackles, you're not winning a title. He is the definition of what you're looking for. And again, good kid off the field, somebody's going to be good in your locker room, can't teach the size and strength. Really good pickup for Penn State.
And from what we've seen as far as Penn State's plans are, this is kind of it for defensive tackle. I mean, they got quite a haul in the class of 2024. T.A. Cunningham, who you remember, Liam Andrews, just to name a couple, but they also had a couple other prospects as well. So Deion Barnes got his defensive tackle group with 4+ just this last cycle. Randy Adirika seems to be that lone interior defensive lineman. They're still going to work on defensive ends. Zahir Mathis, we know about all that. So where does Randy Adirika, how do you project him, Brian, for his time at Penn State? They're going to lose quite a few veterans potentially after this season due to eligibility, some guys that could play their way into an NFL draft pick. Is Randy someone that would benefit from a red shirt? Could he come in and roll early, play right away? How do you see Adirika kind of moving forward?
It depends on how well he picks up the scheme, obviously, but the only question I have with him, because he's just naturally powerful, he's got heavy hands and he plays very aggressively. Does he add any pass rush moves between now and a year from now when he would be getting ready for fall camp in Happy Valley? As a run stuffer, there are little things he can do, being better with his hands, but I don't worry about that. That's pretty easy for a guy that weighs 280 plus now. He'll be close to 300 pounds. Yeah, he's a big guy. So you're not going to teach the size and the strength, and they've got a really good defensive line coach. It's just whether or not he can pass rush. Because of playing at Central in the Miami Public League, he's played against IMG. He knows all the things that come along like that. I think you're talking about a kid that has an opportunity to play early, but I wouldn't say he's going to be like pushing for a starting nod.
Right.
He's going to be somebody who'll play a little bit as a freshman. As a sophomore, he'll have a chance to compete for a starting nod. That would be my guess.
Enrolling early would definitely help with that, because we've seen that Penn State with other players like Tony Rojas, and to name recently, Nolan Rucci, someone who struggled to gain weight as an offensive lineman at Wisconsin. Tony Rojas as a linebacker prospect from the state of Virginia, respectively putting on 30 and 15 pounds, Rucci 15 and Rojas 30. If Randy Adirika can still move the way he moves and add 20 pounds, I mean, he at least becomes an important part of the depth chart as a true freshman again, if he enrolls early.
That's what you're looking for. A freshman that can just help. You're not expecting him at Penn State, a major program, to walk in and start at D tackle. Something has gone terribly wrong if that ends up being the case. But yeah, he can help you 10 snaps a game. Absolutely. That's the kind of role I would anticipate for him as a freshman.
Some special teams. Yeah. Like I said, if everything does end up going well, Brian, I want to circle back to this final part about how Penn State again goes into the state of Florida. The in-state talent just hasn't been much of a thing this season or this recruiting cycle for how Penn State's done. Normally it's dominate the state. This time they branched out: Florida, Texas, Kansas, California. And they go back to Florida once again to fend off. And I know there's been the rumors back and forth, Miami of Florida. They're pushing for him. They're not pushing for him. USC is also in the mix. Like, this was some serious competition. It's not like Penn State fended off the likes of, let's say, a Louisville or a UCF. Like, this was Miami of Florida. That's Randy Adirika's backyard, and then USC that is newly entered into the Big Ten. This is huge for Deion Barnes, who got the defensive end commits that he wanted and now gets one of his primary defensive tackles to commit. Recruiting
Florida is the new norm for your Nittany Lions, which I never thought I would say. When I was a kid, I don't think they had 5 kids from Florida over 10, 15 years. They just didn't try to recruit the state. They didn't really have to much either, but this is the new norm for them. Jawan Sider and just the staff in general, let's give the whole staff credit, have made a concerted effort to make the Sunshine State a part of their package every year in recruiting. I don't know how many guys are really locked in like Sider is, but I would say they figured it out because they're getting somebody every year that's a big-time player. So hats off to the staff.
Penn State continues to at least maintain a semblance of a top 10 class. They have more work to do. And we're going to have a full episode right behind this one to discuss what Penn State can do moving forward now that Randy Adirika is in the fold. He is Brian Smith, Locked On's recruiting expert. You can follow all of his socials and platforms. You can find them down in the description of this podcast. Brian, thanks so much for the time and can't wait to chat again here in a full-length episode momentarily.
Thank you, sir.
And as always, thanks so much for checking out this episode of Locked On Nittany Lions. Be a part of the conversation down in the comments section. What do you think of Randy Adirika's commitment? Do you think Penn State will be able to get some of its other targets to finish out its class of 2025? Let us know down in the comments. If you did like this conversation, leave a like on it. Share it with friends and family. I would greatly appreciate it. And if you're not already, become an everydayer. Subscribe to Locked On Nittany Lions on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts for the latest conversations around your favorite Penn State Nittany Lion teams so that you can stay up to date with all of them. And of course, don't forget, Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube, and now it's available on Amazon Fire TV in the free Fire TV channels app. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus the national shows covering each and every league. You can find Locked On Sports Today now available on YouTube and the free Fire TV channels app.